Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Marketing Live for Thursday, September the 28th, 2017. I'm Rob Zinkin, and I serve as Associate Vice President for Marketing at Indiana University. And on today's episode, we're going to break down employee engagement and your employer brand and how all of this impacts your college's or your university's institutional brand. But first, a reminder that Marketing Live is part of the Higher Ed Live network. Our episodes offer you direct access to the best and brightest minds in education and beyond. We invite you to be a part of our live broadcast with your comments, questions, best practices. You can participate in the discussion by tweeting us using the Higher Ed Live hashtag. All of our episodes are free and easy video archives at higheredlive.com, or take Higher Ed Live with you on the go by subscribing to the podcast. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a digital-first agency committed to tailored solutions that drive real results. Have you ever wondered what prospective teams are thinking when they receive and read or ignore your institution's recruitment marketing? The third study in the Myth-Busting series, in partnership with NRCCUA, is the first to focus on the complete enrollment marketing mix. The research will uncover the best marketing channels and communication preferences that have the biggest influence on prospective teams' perception of your institution. We're tweeting a link, so sign up now and receive early access to the research results and the white paper. Today's episode is sponsored by Funnelback. What is one of the major complaints of staff in higher education? Unbreakable silos. Funnelback for Higher Education was built to tackle higher education's digital challenges head on. Learn more now at funnelback.com/HE. All right, I'm delighted to welcome our guest. First, Jeb Banner. Jeb is CEO and co-founder of Smallbox, an Indianapolis-based culture-powered marketing company founded in 2006 that puts employees at the center of problem solving. He is founder of a tech club, founder of an online music archives, of Indiana Music Online Archive, co-founder or investor in several other businesses in the Indianapolis area, and a special shout out to Jeb because he is an Indiana University alumnus. Go IU. Jeb, great to have you on the program.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, Robert.
Welcome also to Lauren Updike. Lauren is Assistant Director for the Whole U at the University of Washington, and we'll hear lots more about the Whole U on today's episode and Lauren's work with this holistic employee engagement strategy that provides a multitude of programs for the faculty and staff at the University of Washington. Lauren has an extensive career in health and wellness, and before UW, she was with Duke University and Duke University Hospital. So Lauren, great to meet you, and thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Well, our Marketing Live episodes focus on just that, marketing. And so I think it's fascinating that for both of you, your experiences, your careers span far beyond what one would categorize as marketing. So I'd love to hear a bit more from each of you about your own story and your own career path. And as you reflect on that, is there something specific in terms of an experience or anything in particular that has had a lasting impact in terms of shaping your career or shaping your own philosophy? So Jeb, let's start with you.
Yeah, I'd say my father, who was an entrepreneur as well, had a huge impact on how I think about employee experience in particular. He ran an automotive remanufacturing business in South Bend in the 80s and 90s and employed a lot of people from the neighborhood. And it was a poor neighborhood. Many didn't have high school diplomas, certainly not college degrees. And he put in place wellness programs, profit share. He ended up doing pay for performance for them to incentivize them for productivity. And many of them ended up making very good livings and sticking around for quite a long time. He had very good retention. In fact, a couple of the employees he hired back in the 80s are still employed by this company, even though he sold it 15 years ago. So I saw him creating a very intentional employee experience, and I assumed that was kind of what people did. And then I went out into the real world and realized that employees were often the last thought of audience for the brand experience, if you will. They were often neglected. And I started to think about how you could build a really powerful brand by thinking of the employees as a really critical customer of that brand, if you will. And so that's where a lot of my thinking came from, was watching my dad do that. And over the years, I started a couple businesses, and then in 2006, Smallbox came along. And as we evolved, we increasingly focused on how the employee experience drives the customer experience, which outputs to the brand experience. And I think that's only become more true as we've seen social media and the internet create a transparency into organizations so that you can look at what's going on in a way that you couldn't before. And so that ability to have a veneer over the organization has faded with time, and you're no longer going to have that you cannot have that disconnect between the employee and the customer experience. The brand experience is really the sum of those two things. So my dad definitely had a huge impact on that, and I saw the way he led and worked with his employees, and that's something that I think about on a daily basis.
That's great. Appreciate that context. And Lauren, how about you in terms of your own professional journey and anything that has stuck with you and had a major influence on you in your career?
Sure. I grew up in Canada, and both my parents were high school educators. And so my path in life was I wanted to be a teacher. And then the other side of me, I was very shy as a child. And so my parents put me in a lot of sporting activities, and running was something that completely changed my life. Running gave me confidence. I ended up realizing, wow, I'm actually pretty good at this. And my high school track coach, I'll never forget her influence on me of not only putting myself out there and, competing and losing, failing, and then learning from that and coming back strong. I had a very couple tough years in high school as an athlete, and I came back strong. I ended up on a track and field full scholarship down in Louisiana. So this small town Canadian girl went down to the University of Louisiana, had an incredible experience. And through that experience, my background is in exercise physiology, and I did my master's in kinesiology and focusing on worksite wellness. And that one course completely changed my career path from focusing on children and their health and wellness to the employees and their experience. And it's been really, really fun because in my career in our industry, I've been in the industry 17 years now, and it is always something that is a nice to have for employers. And so I really feel like having the endurance of an athlete, and my team is really, we have a small team, but very, very full of endurance. I mean, you have to have endurance to continually show value to leadership and to create these incredible employee engagement programs. So I definitely attribute a lot of my success in my career to that one high school teacher that really impacted my life.
Great. Well, to start the discussion with some questions, I wanted to cite some research findings that essentially reinforce the point that Jeb mentioned earlier in terms of that disconnect between employee experience and the brand. And in 2015, M. Stoner did a survey of marketing leaders, the state of higher ed branding, and of the institutions that had undertaken a brand strategy project or process, about 80% had a cross-functional committee involved in that process that included faculty, staff, representation from across the institution. And I think in higher education, we understand that brand strategy must start from within. It must be an inclusive process. Our faculty and staff must be meaningfully engaged. But while employees may be part of the process, they're not necessarily the focus of the outcome, because brand strategy, we often think of external audiences first, whether that's in higher ed prospective students or any number of constituent groups. So in the survey, in talking with these marketing leaders who had been through brand strategy for their institution, they were asked if their current communications reflected the brand strategy, and communications to faculty and staff ranked second to last on the list, only behind athletics communications. So I think that's a telling point, and I wanted to get your thoughts on that, Jeb, to start us off. Why do organizations overlook their employees when it comes to the brand, and more specifically, that important connection that your brand and the experiences that everyone else have when they have these brand touch points start with the employees first and foremost?
I think it's a very human thing. I think that if you think about how we experience life, I'm a parent, And I think a lot about what my children eat. I think a lot about what they do. I'm actually a lot more on top of what they're doing, if you think of them as the customer, than what I'm doing if I'm the employee. And I think that that similar dynamic plays out within organizations. The employees are part of the body of that organization, and the body is always neglecting itself. And I think that that's just the human dynamic, to always be thinking about who's the customer, where's the money coming from, or where is the value coming from, you know, with parenting and things like that. And to invest all our time and energy into keeping the customer happy, whether it's a student, whether it's alumni, et cetera. And that's also the business engine, right? So that business engine is fed by, on an economic level, by that dynamic. The employee piece of that is the invisible aspect that, even though it's critical to the delivery of those services, it is not explicitly in that line item. You don't see that. I mean, this is one of the big travesties, is having HR report to finance, right? You see this in so many organizations, thinking about this as a cost center and not an engine of value that's being created. So I think that that's just a human thing, to just always think about, where is the money coming from, where is the value being created, and looking at the most obvious thing, which is who's writing the check.
And you referenced this in sharing some of your background, Jeb, the work that you do at Smallbox. Could you tell us a little bit more about how that work evolved in terms of the work that you do in helping organizations develop and build their brand? And how did that evolve into a process where the employee experience became something that was the starting point, or at the heart of a company's brand?
It's interesting. We started out as a web development company. So our first 1.0 iteration was building custom websites for businesses. And we still do some of that work, but that was really all we did. But as we then got into designing the experience, then of course we began to think more about brand. Then we started thinking more about the customer. And then we began to dig deeper, and it was just like peeling an onion. You just kept peeling and peeling. And eventually you realized that culture was so critical to brand experience, that the difference between a good and a great brand often was the culture of the organization, which was manifesting through the brand. And so we began to look at, like, well, what are the elements of culture? How do you start to build a healthy, vibrant culture? And there's no silver bullet for this, but that led us to be thinking about, okay, is there a piece here that we can look at with values? How can we look at values, and how values can then be manifest internally and externally through the brand? How can we have vision? Or I often think of vision as the why of the business, sort of like, what's the impact you're trying to create in the world? How can that vision have an internal and external piece to it? And then we started doing things ourselves, like we do a factory week every 6 months, where we take our company off-site for a week and we shut down the business and we just work on ourselves. And then we began to help other organizations do that kind of work, where they then can take their team off-site. And that sort of self-care has really great brand outputs. We also began doing community, or they call it CSR, you know, community engagement, giving back, doing 24-hour web projects and grants to people with ideas in the community, writing projects. We recently did a week-long sprint to help a refugee group that had lost funding on a national level with the new administration. We began to see that as both a cultural thing that was changing the way we worked and thought, and also a brand thing. So we saw this, we began helping our customers, our clients, start to think about that more. It's like there's no separation between the two. And in our experience, either they get it or they don't get it. And if they don't get it, then we really can't help them. If they do get it, then we can come alongside and say, hey, we can do diary studies with their employees to understand what that experience is like. We can engage them in different kinds of projects and activities. We use design thinking as a methodology, which is very human-centered. It's not one thing. Every organization is different, but it's all about empowering people to be human at work in a lot of ways. Like, how do they get to that human experience? I think that that's something that we are still figuring out, but it's the more we do it, the more I buy into it.
And I want to follow up on that point about design thinking, and you're mentioning designing that experience, because I know Smallbox is a thought leader in design thinking, and that's something that is in your wheelhouse as well. Tell us a little bit about how design thinking has been incorporated into your processes, your framework, and your approach to working with organizations when it comes to employee engagement.
Absolutely. So design thinking is really rooted in empathy. So that empathy piece is so critical. If you think about other problem-solving approaches, my experiences is you get a bunch of people in a room and they kind of sort of agree on the problem, and there's a lot of whiteboarding and talking and conversation, and then usually whichever idea is approved by the highest paid person goes into the business. I mean, that's mostly what I've seen with problem solving. So when you take a empathy-based approach, which is very human-centered, and you step way back and you say, okay, let's not even say what the problem is. Let's talk about the problem space. Let's go into this. Let's not be prescriptive. Let's go and listen. Let's understand. Let's observe. Let's really engage people. With employee experience, that's perfect for that. So like I mentioned, diary studies. We worked with one organization where we sent diary studies to 40 different people across the organization, gave them envelopes to mail back to us. And we had people that were in the field, people in the office in different positions. And that qualitative data, those stories, are often so much of what really drive change. I think a lot of leaders, they think we need quantitative data, like, stats to drive change. They're good. I'm not saying they're not good, but if you want to engage people's hearts and minds, you need to get at that gut level, which is the narrative or the story level. And when you hear a story of somebody, your fellow employee, struggling with something or working through a problem, there's a level of engagement and commitment there that's different than if you just say 75% of people have a problem with something. So mining for those stories and those insights then can move into the second phase of the process, which is framing, defining what is the actual problem. Now that we've listened, let's agree upon that problem. And then the third phase is ideation. Let's start solving that problem. And all of this is meant to be collaborative and iterative, and it's meant to be democratized. So it's not just that highest paid person. It's bringing ideas in from all these different sectors. Then filtering, converging onto those 1 or 2 or 3 ideas that you want to prototype. So this sort of gets into the agile side of design thinking. Prototype and test, the 5th step, testing it. And there's a feedback loop, and it's not entirely linear, where then new inputs are coming in, and you're changing the way the organization works with the process itself, which is one of the things I love about design thinking.
I appreciate you walking us through that. Some of our listeners may have seen a recent piece in the Chronicle of Higher Education about design thinking and applying it to higher education. Mm-hmm. So thank you for that framework. And I want to follow up with another question about a framework, and that is what I've seen you write about the employee experience in terms of the elements, the ingredients for a people-centered workplace. Could you take us through those 4 key elements for creating, again, a people-centered workplace?
Yeah. The way that we've come to see it is that it starts with the individual. So we think about well-being. How is that person experiencing the workplace as a human being in the workplace? That speaks to wellness and there's everything from like light and screen time to standing, sitting, activity, etc. And then the second piece of that moves into belonging. So that's more the tribal side of work. That's feeling accepted. That's that best friend at work question in the Gallup survey. Feeling like you belong in that workplace is very important to the human experience. And then the going out from there is the work. So engagement. Are you engaged? Are you being pulled into the work? Is the work leveraging your unique abilities and gifts? Are you energized when you leave work and not drained? So engagement's that third piece. And the fourth piece, which is the thing that I think is so often missed, is transformation. Now, are you creating that impact in the world that is beyond the work? That work can be great, but if that work is just kind of like putting widgets in a box, and you're really good at putting widgets in a box, but you don't feel connected to a bigger impact, I think there's a missing piece to the human experience. So to really have that full human work experience, I think you need to have that sense of well-being, belong to the place, the tribal piece, have that engagement, and experience transformation, which is the growth impact side of work. Nobody does this right, to be clear.
Well, I love the combination that we have here with some of these core tenets from Jeb, and now we have a wonderful case study with Lauren in the University of Washington in terms of being a role model for the rest of higher education when it comes to employee engagement, thanks to the work that you and your colleagues have done. So I'm excited to hear more about the Whole You program. So let's start, Lauren, with what exactly is it? What is the Whole You?
Great. Well, the Whole You is a holistic wellness engagement program that fosters community through personal interests. So our program falls under 6 pillars: staying healthy, eating well, being active, life changes and events, volunteerism, and engaging personal interests. So 3 things combined kind of define our program. The first is, just like Jeb had said, we created this program for UW by UW. And so all of our events, our articles, our programs, our challenges, these ideas are actually fostered and funneled through our employees. We ask them on a yearly basis and ask them for feedback on an ongoing basis. Who do you want to hear from at the university at the expert level? What do you want to learn about? What are your personal interests? What does well-being or wellness mean to you? And what types of events that build community do you want to see on your campus? And then my team, we work together and we make it happen. The next thing we focus on is fostering those connections. So the University of Washington, we have 3 campuses, 2 medical centers, and a ton of remote locations. And so what we try to do is we want to connect internally the employees with all of the amazing things that are happening on campus. So just a couple examples would be, we foster that connection between the UW employee and the UW athletic program. And how we do that is, number 1, we offer free tickets to all of their games. We offer discounted tickets to the football games so that custodian can go to a football game at a reduced rate and bring their family and experience and really feel connected to the university at a different level. We also tap into the coaching expertise. We've got some high caliber coaches at the University of Washington. They partner with the Whole You, and they'll come and do motivational talks, goal setting talks. In fact, they also have opened up their training centers to some of our UW families that want to, they want to experience a workout with Elise Ray, who's a former Olympian and now the head gymnastics coach, or they want to try a strength training session through one of our strength and conditioning coaches on the football team. So what we're seeing is the employees aren't just reading about it. They're not just watching the game on TV. They're actually developing relationships with these athletic programs, and then they're being inspired and they feel that sense of community. So that's one example. Another connection is, typical wellness or engagement programs have a big team with experts. And what we do differently is we use our experts within the organization of UW Medicine. So all of our seminars, our articles around healthy behaviors, we actually pull in UW physicians, UW dermatologists, UW psychologists, our University of Washington Medical Center's dietitians, and they become our experts and this provides a platform for them to share their knowledge within the UW community. And then the last thing to kind of outline the Whole You is kind of that holistic approach where Jeb talked about meeting people where they are. And I always give the example to really outline our program in a nutshell is if you like to garden, if that's what makes you happy and you feel well by gardening, the Whole You is going to connect you with other employees within University of Washington that also like to garden. And then we're going to reach out to the UW gardeners who manage the 750 acres of University of Washington and ask them if they'd like to come and do a seminar or an activity about how to compost, how to build a rain garden, or what pots they should plant in the wintertime. And they love this. They love this opportunity. It puts, a UW gardener, it provides this platform for them to really share their knowledge and expertise to the UW community. And we always like to take it a step further. We then reach out to the UW community of gardening centers. And we ask these gardening centers, hey, are you willing to give a University of Washington employee a discount on, supplies or services or merchandise? And so it's kind of all packaged in one, and that's kind of where that whole U comes into play. We're also not a prescriptive program. We provide the tools, we provide the education, and we provide the community support. So we put on fun departmental challenges, whether it's one department against another department, trying to reach 1 million stairs in one day, and then they raise money and give back, $20,000 to the Facing Homelessness program. So we're not a program that says, based on your health risk assessment, you have high blood pressure, so you need to meet with, X, Y, and Z to get that biometric down. It's basically, okay, high blood pressure is the topic. Let's interview a UW physician. Let's interview a UW dietitian. Let's provide some education and tools, and then let's do a program around that so people feel they have that support where they spend most of their time during the day.
Wow, that's awesome. So I know the program is relatively new, launching in 2014. How did it get started? How did you determine the need? How did you go about making the case for it?
Yeah, so we launched in 2014, and this was a leadership, and our Vice President of Human Resources thought, you know what? Our employees need something that makes them feel valued. And also, our institution is ginormous and very siloed, and we have so much going on at the University of Washington that it only made sense to create something that could be the central location where faculty and staff and students could go to and find resources that support them in what they define as their well-being. So yeah, we're going into, we're almost at 4 years, and currently our numbers, success is always, by numbers and impact in the stories. We have reached over 100,000 UW faculty, staff, and their families in total participation in 4 years. We have written over 600 articles on our website, and we have hosted over 500 events and challenges at the University of Washington.
Great, impressive figures. So I appreciate hearing those metrics. From a bigger picture standpoint, what are your thoughts in terms of the impact that the whole U program has had related to that point of employer brand and UW's ability to retain, to recruit the top talent that your institution needs to be successful?
Yeah, so under the retaining our employees, what we found the last couple of years, the University of Washington, the Med Center, provides a work culture survey, and under the feedback and comments, they've been getting inundated of how much the whole U has impacted not only their work experience, but their relationships with those they work with, and also their health. So we do see a ton of comments and feedback on these major institution surveys. And how it's interesting, we are now, like I said before, we have a small team, and it's amazing when you first start that brand of offering all these opportunities. It's been really cool to see other departments now reaching out to us to attend job fairs. So we're now being viewed as, this great benefit to work at the University of Washington. You have this incredible employee engagement program, and then you also have this vast, huge discount network by being an employee. So it's been really exciting to be part of these career and job fairs around each department.
Well, I think your point is an interesting one about the University of Washington being a ginormous place, as you said, and lots of silos. So I'll turn back to Jeb to ask for any advice that he might have for successfully managing employee experience across a large decentralized organization like a university, where, say, at the University of Washington or here at Indiana University, there are 20,000 some employees and multiple departments and units and offices that in some cases have their own culture.
Man, all right. Well, that's a tough nut to crack. We worked with IU Alumni Association quite a bit, and JT Forbes over there. I don't know if you know him at all, but great guy and very progressive in what he's thinking about. You know, the siloing is real. It's there for a reason. You know, you can't have everybody in everybody else's business constantly, otherwise nothing gets done. But it also then creates these barriers that are really difficult to cut down when you need collaboration. And I think collaboration isn't always native to some of these institutions that have come up in an age when it wasn't necessarily needed the way it is now to solve a new set of challenges. I mean, higher ed is at an inflection point, and it's being threatened by so many different sources. I mean, Wikipedia is a threat, right? MOOCs are a threat. A changing workplace and a new economy is a threat. And so the need for collaboration and innovation is just through the roof. And I think a lot of universities are struggling with this. And I think that I have not seen anybody figure it out. I wish I could say I had a case study to say, man, look at these guys. I think Purdue, and I'm an IU guy, so I hate saying this. I think Purdue's getting closer on this. I think they're starting to work more in an agile way around working collaboratively and solving problems. I think Mitch Daniel's done a very good job there, and I begrudgingly say that. But the truth is that it's not in human nature to be vulnerable and to say I need help. And I don't think it's an academic nature specifically to ask for help. I think a lot of that culture is built upon having the answers, and I think that we have to get past that. We have to be more vulnerable, and that's a culture change that honestly I don't know if higher ed's up for that.
Okay, challenge accepted, I think. So for those who work in marketing and maybe listening today and have room to improve and room to grow, as we've just talked about, what recommendations, Jeb, would you have for them in beginning? Where do they start in terms of thinking long term? We want to discover, we want to understand our employer brand. We want to help employee engagement across our institution. What can I do in my seat as a marketing leader at a college or university?
I think they can go and they can start their own ad hoc groups that are cross-functional across the organization. They can, I think the ideal state for any employee is to work as if they don't care if they get fired. That is not the mentality of most university employees, and that's unfortunate. There is a aversion to risk, and so I think going forward and thinking to themselves, I want to do things that put me at this cusp of my employment, you know, and really push themselves out in that fringe. I mean, this whole U program that Lauren's put together is fantastic. But I guarantee, or I would imagine, you had leadership support that was saying, hey, we got to do something, right? Some sort of support. Is that right?
Yeah, we definitely do have leadership support. And I do think that is extremely important, you know, when it comes from the top down, when deans, our president, our vice presidents, our executive vice presidents, even managers are involved, other employees feel like they have more, you know, a sense of permission that, yeah, I'm going to take my lunch and I'm going to go to this really cool yoga class and I'm going to come back. Or, you know what, our department is now going to create this really great supportive workplace wellness within our own department. But it does take leadership support, and, you know, you have to invest in it.
And I think that you took the ball and you ran with it in a big way. And I think that a lot of unfortunately, a lot of universities are not even giving talented people like you the ball. And it starts on the trustee level with a lot of legacy trustees that are holding the keys and holding the organization back because of tradition. And those traditions are really calcifying organizations to change and adapt. And I think you're going to see a lot of universities and colleges going extinct in the coming decades, which is sad to see when they don't necessarily have to. So I think there has to be a change at the top. If there's not that change at the top, then things like the whole U don't happen. Lauren will go somewhere else with her unique abilities, and that's a real challenge. So I think that the leadership piece cannot be underestimated. And then you have the other side of it, which I said earlier, which is that more kind of ground up side of like, hey, I'm just going to go find 5 people that agree with me on this problem. We're going to start solving it, and we're going to disrupt, and we're going to see what happens, and we're willing to get fired. That kind of courage is fairly rare in my experience at universities. Now it exists, but it's rare. Fostering the conditions for that kind of courage to flourish is, again, a leadership thing. Leadership has to make it okay to be vulnerable and to put yourself out there and to try new things. And unfortunately, the leaders that are often being put in place by trustees and by the people backing universities, big funders, are more likely, frankly, older white men ensconced in a tradition that needs to be shook up.
Well, I want to go back to another related theme in terms of the collaboration that's needed and the obstacle of silos, and ask you, Lauren, how you and your team interface with university marketing at UW. How does that working relationship work? And I'm curious in terms of looking out at the connection between communications experiences for internal audiences, faculty, staff, and where that alignment is, how that syncs then with what the university does in terms of its brand and its interactions, communications with external audiences.
Yeah, well, interesting. When we first launched, University of Washington's marketing group actually created our mark, our whole U mark, keeping in mind with that fostering community and making this program for UW by UW. University of Washington's marketing program and the whole U, we work very closely together. We cross-promote both internal and external opportunities and events for both the employees, students, and their families, and the Alumni Association. We work very closely together. And frankly, we rely on University of Washington's marketing internal communications for the success of people registering for our programs. UW has a weekly newsletter that the whole U has a space in that newsletter. And then UW also has a daily email that goes out, and the whole U has a space in that as well. And that gives us the opportunity to reach all 40,000 faculty and staff through our articles, our upcoming events in the pipeline, featuring some of our faculty and our physicians and our experts on campus. So that relationship is very important. It's very strong, and University of Washington's marketing group not only participate in our programs, but are definitely huge fans of the whole U.
Great, and I imagine there are other new fans of the whole U after hearing today about the program, and maybe interested in opportunities at the University of Washington. So what's next for the program in terms of growing and the coming years, what you hope to achieve with it that you have not been able to yet?
Well, so January will mark going into our 5th year. We're still new. The goals of the program is continue to grow and continue to reach more people. We would definitely like to provide more measurable results. Leadership does always want to see that value. Our types of programs are always a nice to have, not necessarily a must have. And so my job is to convince our leadership that this program changes and impacts the work experience for all of our faculty and staff. We're also starting to be more involved in other initiatives, as well as involved in other committees and involved with students. We are now listed as a resource for the student population to participate in some of our events. So, you know, I see us just growing, and I see us being that model for other universities to take the risk and, you know, build their program by using the resources within. You know, like Jeb said, yes, we have leadership support, but we have to be very creative in building our program by using our resources and our experts. You know, we partner with UW Recreation, and they provide our fitness instructors. We partner with UW Medicine, and they provide our speakers. You know, so there's no cost to us. Which that's kind of where your budget gets really expensive, because you have to, you know, pay the instructors or the presenters. So, you know, definitely we have to use those resources within the institution to keep the program successful.
Well, as we've talked about, there isn't necessarily a plethora of shining examples across academia to point to. Lots of room to grow for institutions in this area. University of Washington being a great one, and it's been terrific to hear about the program that Lauren and her team are leading. So, Jeb, looking outside of higher ed or even nonprofit, if you will, what are some organizations perhaps that you look to for inspiration, or you look to as some outstanding examples of being intentional and getting it right in this area?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I do think that, I don't mean to sound too down on the university scene. I think there's a lot of positive things happening, like the Whole U. And actually, I've heard of the Whole U. So, you know, Lauren, through a client of mine who does work with Washington. So there's a lot of bright spots out there in that space. And I think that change is underfoot. But I look at, you know, an organization like Basecamp, run by Jason Fried, used to be called 37 Signals. The way they approach work, he's got a book coming out soon called the Calm Company. I've gotten to know people that work for him, and his approach to the employee experience is very in line with what I think that it needs to be. He's against workaholism. He believes that people should live very balanced lives. It's a very human-centered approach to employment. They've been a very successful company for a long time, and have been able to give back a lot to the community, different communities locally and around the world, and provide a lot of thought leadership. That's a company I look at quite a bit. Locally, there's a number of businesses. My good friend is sort of in the academic world a little bit, but runs a business called Lessonly, Max Yoder, and they do essentially, it's like a learning management system that you can build for employee training and things like that. And he's built this company from nothing to 70-some employees, and he's been very focused on the employee experience the whole way through, and on values. And it's been a real joy for me to you know, be able to see him do that, and it's always fun to see it from the inside and to hear all the things he struggles with along the way. Now, those are both tech examples. You know, I think there are a lot of, I met with this CEO recently that runs I think they are a parts distributor ship here in Indianapolis. And the name eludes me off the top of my head, but it's the most generic name, like Allied Parts or something like that. And to hear him talk about values and how they create role clarity and how they promote people and the culture they're building there, it really struck me that, hey, you don't have to just work in a cool industry to run a great business that cares about its employees. And that's, of course, what my dad taught me as well, is nothing less cool than dirty automotive parts. But, you know, so there's a lot of good examples out there. And I think that those companies are the ones that are retaining really great talent, and they're also attracting really great customers.
Excellent. And thanks for the recommendation with Basecamp. I think that's a wonderful example. Great book. And speaking of podcasts, in addition to Higher Ed Live, there's a new podcast called Rework that they have just started. So some great resources there as well. And Lauren, with again, the wonderful example at the University of Washington, would love to connect and share some of the things we're doing at Indiana University, which I think is innovative in terms of engaging our employees across a very, very broad enterprise. So as we wrap up, I'll look to either of you in terms of any final thoughts, recommendations, suggestions, or charge to our listeners as they think about employee engagement at their organization.
I would say my advice would be endurance, right? Those of you that have to or that are tasked to increase employee engagement or create something for employee engagement is make sure that team has endurance and really has a passion around the employee experience. And, you know, engaging people in their interests, engaging people in their wellness, you are going to see a more productive and more positive and definitely more successful employee team member.
I'll go with another E word, empathy. I think empathy is really critical to connect and understand and to truly listen to your employees and to let them feel heard, to experience what they experience. If you want to solve for that engagement piece, you have to begin with empathy. So I just say, make sure that you're practicing empathy at all points. Otherwise, you're going to be solving the wrong problem.
Super. Well, this has been a fantastic discussion. So thank you both very much, Jeb and Lauren, for sharing your time, sharing your expertise. I think we've walked away with a lot of food for thought, some great advice, and definitely some inspiration going forward. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And as always, thank you to M. Stoner for making Marketing Live possible. And thanks as well to Funnelback for sponsoring today's episode. Be sure to get reminders about this and other episodes by subscribing to the Higher Ed Live newsletter. You can browse the video archives at higheredlive.com or subscribe to the podcast. I'm Rob Zinkin. Thanks again for tuning in to Marketing Live on the Higher Ed Live Network.